Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at how you can configure Entra ID authentication and access Snowflake data with your service account identities. The service accounts are a handful identity type that lets organizations provide other machines and applications with programmatic access to your data without the need of human intervention. Typically, the authentication mechanism used to authenticate and obtain the service account credentials relies on OAuth 2.0 client credential flow. The flow we'll today be configuring our services for. If you want to authenticate using individual user identities, I have another video on my YouTube channel covering required configuration, and I'll leave the link in the video below. During the course of this video, we'll walk through the 3 key steps to get everything connected. First, we'll start with creating new OAuth 2 applications in our Microsoft Entra ID tenant. We'll then establish trust between our Snowflake account and the Entra ID tenant. And finally, if you're an Alteryx Designer user, there's a bonus for you. We'll connect to Snowflake from Alteryx Designer, leveraging our Entra ID service principal identity. So let's get started and make your data access both secure and efficient. So here I am in my Entra ID environment, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create 2 applications, a resource application that will represent our Snowflake API. I'll also create a role for this for the service principal that will be accessing the Snowflake API, and the second application will be our OAuth 2.0 client application, which will have access to our application, will expose an API of our resource application, hence Snowflake API. So let's move ahead and create these apps. What I'm going to do, I'm going to navigate to my Entra ID, and here on the left side, hand side, I have the app registrations tab. I will click register new application. I'll provide a descriptive name. So this will be my Snowflake resource app SP. Right, so this will be my resource application. I'll keep all the other values to their defaults, so that only accounts in this organization directly can access this API. And I will not be specifying any redirect URIs. Next, I click register. So I have registered my application now. Now I need to expose an API of this application. So I'm going to navigate to expose an API here, create a new application ID. I'll keep this to its default, and the API ID of this application has been assigned to it. As I said, what I need to also do, I need to create a service principal role to this API so that my service principal will be able to access this role. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to navigate to the app roles in here, click create app role. I'll give this a name. So this will be my Snowflake SP role. I will set the allowed member types to applications only. And for the value, I will specify the value of this role in the following format: session, role, and R1. This is a specific Snowflake syntax that you need to use, where you basically specify the session that you're trying to basically assume a role within a session, and then you specify the R1 role. In my case, I do have the R1 role configured in my Snowflake instance and attributed to a service account that that is propagated from my Entra ID into the Snowflake instance. I also need to specify the description. I'll just use this value here and click apply, and now my role has been successfully created and attributed to my resource application. Great. Now that I'm done with my resource application, I need to create the OAuth client that we will use to perform the client credential flow and get the access tokens for our API, hence for our resource app. To do this, I'm going back to my app registrations in Entra, click new registration, and just for the sake of consistency, I think I just want to assign my client application with exactly the same name. So I go once again to my app registrations, click new registrations, and I provide this name, Snowflake, but in this case, it won't be resource, but the client app SP. I will keep these settings as they are, and finally I need to specify the redirect URI. I'll select public and native application because Alteryx Designer, for example, is a native application that's installed in your machine. And for the actual value, I will type in the HTTP local host, right, and then specify the specify the value for the port value. So this value, for example, would be, okay, I think I must have mistyped it. So it's HTTP localhost 8080 is the value for the redirects URI that I have set. Click register. So I have now created my application. While I am on the screen, I'm going to copy the application or client ID of our application. This is an important value that I need to collect. So here I have my Snowflake inputs. And the inputs I need to collect as part of this configuration. The next value I need to collect, well, I first need to create this value is the client secret. To create a client secret, I navigate to my applications, goes to security and certificates and secrets, click new client secret. And here I type in a name. I'll just provide it was a very simple name, secret1, click add and copy this secret value. And don't worry about it. I mean, if you, for some reason, if you decide to reuse this client secret value, I'll be completely deleting this applications after this demo. So the secrets won't work. Great. Now that I created the client secret, what I'm going to do, I am going to grant this application with access to my API, to my resource application, right? To do this, I need to navigate to API permissions of the application and click Edit Permission. Next, I navigate to APIs my organization uses, and here I need to type in Snowflake, and I will locate the name of our resource application and click on it. As you can see, this resource application does not allow for delegated permissions type, which is great because we do not need this. We are not authenticating with user identities. We instead want to authenticate with application permissions type. So we click on applications permissions, and here in the permissions, we select the role that we configured for our resource app, hence our API. We click add the permissions, and we have added the permissions, and we see that we also prompted to grant access to use this permission by Entra. So we've done this as admins. And I believe we're now all set. The only thing I need to do now, I need to get the scope value for our API, for our authentication call. To get the scope value, we click on the permission that we have just assigned and copy this entire value except for the session role anypart, or essentially the ending, the suffix that we have at the end. We do this, and then we have this value of our resource application as the API with a slash, and then we need to add dot default. Right, this value is important because all the for the client credential flow, the Entra ID APIs expect you to specify the default scope for the API call that you're making, and therefore this should be the scope value attributed. Great, so we have our code collected as well. Now I need to navigate to the overview page of our client application. Click on endpoints here at the top and locate a token endpoint. And token endpoint is located is right here. So I'm going to copy and paste this value in here. And finally, I need to get the well-known OpenID endpoint. This is a OpenID Connect or OIDC metadata document that I will use to collect a few other inputs in the subsequent step when we'll be configuring our Snowflake instance to trust tokens issued by Entra ID. However, for the Entra ID part, I think we are all done. We're all set. We have all the required inputs. The only last thing I'm going to do just before jumping into the Snowflake configuration, I would like to make sure that we're actually able to obtain the JOT token via the setup, the resource and client application programmatically. And to do this, what I want to do, I want to open a postman here. I already have a collection prepared, and what I need to do, I just go ahead and create a new set of credentials with the authentication mechanism set to OAuth client credentials flow, and I need to then provide the token endpoint of our client application, Okay, we're going to paste it in here. Then we need to specify the client ID and client secrets. For application, I have all these values quite handfully prepared in this notepad. Great, and finally we want to specify the scope. Boom. Okay, we have now configured our postman collection. Let's click get new access type, and as you can see, the authentication has succeeded, and we got our JOT token, which is already a good sign. Now I want to validate what the JOT token looks like, and for this I navigate to the jot.io and paste the encrypted version of the token onto this left tab, and here in the right tab we see our token decrypted, and based on what I see, I believe we have everything configured just right. So we have the audience value, which is the ID, the API ID that we assigned to a resource application. We also have the SAP claim, which basically represents the ID of the service principal identity that has been granted this token to. And most importantly, we have the roles claim here propagator, which is a role that has been passed by this API to this identity. And this claim is very important because Snowflake actually expects you to pass the role that the service account identity assumes as part of the call inside the role claim. Okay, with this, we have completed our configuration of Entra ID environment. We created our resource application representing an API. We created our OAuth client application. We collected all the required inputs. We also tested that the OAuth client application works as intended. Now we're going to move on and proceed with our Snowflake configuration. All right, now we navigate our Snowflake console as an account admin, and what we're going to do, we're going to run a few commands that shall basically allow us to set up trust between our Entra ID and our Snowflake instance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to navigate to my Snowflake project, and here I have a brand new project that I'm just starting. And the very first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to run the following command: create security integration. You can provide a very descriptive name to the integration here. So I call it external OAuth Azure SP, stands for service principal. For the application type, for the integration type, we say external OAuth. We make it enabled. We set the OAuth type to Entra. The external OAuth audience list is something we're gonna collect just now from several inputs. Okay, and then we need to pass specify a few additional parameters here. Let's collect those. So we have this first parameter that we need to edit, which is the external OAuth audience list. The external OAuth audience list is essentially the app ID of our resource application that we configured in Entra. And therefore, to get that value, we need to navigate to our Entra application. Right, locate the resource app, go to the expose an API, and this is essentially our value. If you do not want to do this, and you have, for example, your JOT token that we collected just a moment ago handy, you can also locate this audience value from within the audience claim of the actual JOT token. These two values are identical. For example, if I do this, you can see that I was able to locate this value in here. So this value will represent my external OAuth audience list value. So I go ahead, copy and paste it in here. Next, I need to locate the external OAuth issuer URL, and there are two ways how this could be located. You can either go ahead into your JOT token and just copy the value from here, or otherwise you can just use the following format: https sts@windows.net/your Entra ID tenant ID, right? I can show you how we can validate this. So if I go back to the overview, I navigate to my tenant ID, I copy the value, and I paste it right here instead of this curly brackets. And now I will go to my JOT token once again and copy this value from here. I shall be able to locate this value. See, they're exactly the same. Another value I need to locate here is the external OAuth JWT keys URL. And this value cannot be that easily found, but we have actually partially found it already. So what we're going to do now, do you remember as in the previous step when configuring the Entra ID environment, we copied something called OpenID connect metadata document. So the same value I saved in my cheat sheet. So if I now go ahead to my Snowflake console and I just paste this value here in the new tab, I'll get redirected to the OpenID configuration of my Entra ID tenant. And here we can see that this JSON object that's returned by this call actually represents the JW keys URI. So everything we need to do, we just need to copy this JW keys URI itself, the value of this key, and paste it in here. And I think with this, we are pretty much done with our configuration. However, before moving on, I would like to pay your attention to a few additional attributes that might be of relevance to your configuration. Well, first of all, we need to specify the external OAuth token user mapping claim. I already have it set to sub, because I know that my Entra ID of client application returns the ID of service principal or user principal identity in the subclaim. In your configuration, if you want to use some other ID, some other attributes and pass those attributes while, let's say, a different claim, it's totally configurable in the Entra ID side, on the Entra ID side, but you need to make sure that you specify the right claim, which actually contains the identity of either user or service principal. So here you can see that my identity ID is this value in here, and it's passed in subclaim. So therefore, I'm saying the external of token user mapping claim is set to sub. So what this tells, and then we have the external of Snowflake user mapping attribute login name. So what this essentially tells to Snowflake, whenever you get a token and you validate that the audience list match, the external issuer match, the JW keys, which were used to sign the token matching as well, you go into subclaim of the JOT token and you validate and you get the value of that sub, and you try to locate the user in the Snowflake user database with the matching value using the login name parameter or attribute of Snowflake user. Hope this makes sense. So this is how basically Snowflake does the mapping of identities between the identity passed in Entra ID issued JOT token and the user name attribute in Snowflake. Great. Now that we're done with this, everything we need to do is just run this command. And you can actually learn more about how this command works and what it does specifically on the Snowflake in Snowflake documentation. Now that we're done with this, the only thing I want to do, I want to make sure that I actually have an identity that has been attributed to that, like a Snowflake user, a service user that has been attributed to that is listed under the same ID in the login name. So to do this, what I need to do, I need to navigate to my admin console, and here I have users and roles. And here I have my system user, and you see that this system user has a different login name at the moment because this was the result of my previous test that I ran. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, I mean, I could of course go ahead and create a new user if I wanted to, but yeah, I think I'll just edit the existing one. So here I have my system user, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to just remove this value from the login name and specify the ID of my service principal passed in the JOT token in here. And you can see that this user also has the role name R1, which is exactly the role that we configured in our Entra ID environment for the resource application, right? Hope this all makes sense now. So go ahead and save this user, and now this user has been created. And with this, we have we have created trust between our Snowflake instance and Entra ID environment. To test that everything works as intended, what we can do, we could probably do the following. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna call the statements endpoint of our Snowflake instance, right, from our Postman, using the credentials that we obtain here programmatically from our Entra, and we are going to ask Snowflake to list all the tables that the specific identity has access to. And if everything works as intended, we shall be able to get the access token. We say we want to use this token, and then we want to use this token to call this API. Let's see if this works. Wonderful. And as you can see, we got the 200 back from our Snowflake API call, and here we have the list of all the data sets that this service identity has access to. And with this, we are done with our configuration. We have created our Entra ID application, resource and client application. We have then created trust between our Snowflake and Entra ID instances. And finally, we made sure that the service account identities are properly mapped with each other and have the matching values. All right, and if you are an Alteryx Designer user and have been wondering how you can leverage the service principal authentication with our Snowflake connector, I'm going to demonstrate this for you right now. Here I have my Alteryx Designer. I have my new canvas in front of me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop an input tool here in a canvas. I will select Use Data Connection Manager and click on Set Up Connection. I'm going to navigate to Data Sources. Next, I need to locate Snowflake as my data source of preference. I'm going to click this Quick Connect option. Right, so here I have my list of Snowflake connections. I'm going to create a new connection. I'll provide this connection name, Snowflake Entra ID SP for service principal. Then I need to specify my Snowflake instance URI, which is this value that I have already copied. I do not need to specify database schema. The warehouse is the compute WH warehouse I want to use, and I can of course specify the specific role I want to create a connection with, but in my case I will just completely skip this step and I'll rely on the default role assigned for the service identity. Once I'm done with this, I click save and I save my connection, and then I need to create a new set of credentials. I navigate to the authentication methods, and here I have my generic OAuth authentication method. I'll create a new set of credentials. I'll call it Entra ID SP for service principal. And for the grant type here, I will select the client credentials grant type. So you can see now I am presented with a view quite similar to the one we've seen in our Postman. So we need to specify OAuth token URI, client ID, and client secret. Have all these values quite conveniently copied in here. So I'm going to paste it here, and the client ID value will be this one, and the client secret as well. Great. I will send the client credentials to anybody. That's all fine. And this will be my credential name called service principal credentials. And once again, I need to specify the scope. Just remember, our scope value is the application ID of the ID of our API that we're exposing, followed by the default. Great. I think at this point in time, we're all done. So we configured our data source connection. We configured our authentication method as well. We can click create a link. And what I can do now, I can navigate to this booger menu here and click test connection. So now Alteryx Designer has called the token endpoint of our Entra ID, called the access token, and used that access token to authenticate to Snowflake instance. And as you can see, the connection test has succeeded. So we can click connect, and within a few seconds, we shall be presented with a Visual Query Builder. And off we go. We have access to our Snowflake data. This is a dynamic Snowflake instance, so there's not much data in it, but just to show you that we can actually read the data, I'll do this. I'll also set the record limit to only 100 records because I do not want to read the entire data set. I will then drop the browse tool and run the workflow. And there you go. We have successfully accessed our Snowflake instance from Alteryx Designer using our service account configured in Entra ID. All right, and this brings us to the end of this video. Just to sum up what we have done during the course of this video, we created the Entra ID applications, client and resource applications. We exposed the API of the resource application representing our Snowflake API via the OAuth client. We collected all the required inputs. Then we moved ahead and created a trust between our Snowflake instance and the Entra ID environment so that the Snowflake instance trusts JWT tokens issued by our Entra ID OAuth client. We validated that the service account identities are properly mapped between the JWT token claims and the user attribute, the login name attribute of the Snowflake users. And then finally, for the Alteryx users, we have shown how you can establish the service account-based authentication and access your data from Snowflake, from Alteryx Designer, and leveraging Entra ID. I have another video on my channel for those of you who are interested in how to enable this configuration for the user principal identities. And in my upcoming videos, I'll be I'll deep dive into the difference between the service and user principal identities and which one is better or should be used in which specific use case. Because obviously the user principal identities provide more granular access to the specific data, and they're limiting the scope of access to only the data that specific user is entitled to use. It has its own downsides as well because since user principal based authentication relies on the authorization code flow, it is an interactive code flow that usually has the MFA included into process as well, and it really is the flow requiring the direct user intervention. The service principal authentication using client credential flow, however, is a more flexible authentication method for environments when you need to, let's say, run some scheduled data access sessions from, let's say, your machines. It has its own benefits because there's no human intervention. As you could see, everything happens under the hood using the just one simple call to the token endpoint and providing some of the required inputs. And in return, you get the identity of the service principal. The downside of using the client credential service principal authentication is that usually you do not have the service principals are granted with a greater level of access to the data inside the data sources. So it might represent in certain situations a security risk. Alteryx Designer, however, has the Alteryx Designer and Server products that allow you to dynamically switch identities between the design time and runtime, or let's say execution time experience in Alteryx Server product using DCM connection handling. If you'd like to learn more about the authentication domain overall, or have any ideas for some of the other videos that should be covered on this channel, feel free to leave your comments below. And I'll see you in the next video.